In the dark hours of March 30th, 2016, a man once dubbed the Prince of Penrith bled out in a suburban driveway in Western Sydney, his body riddled with bullets, his lifeblood soaking into the pavement beneath him. Michael Scott Davey, known to some as Mickey D, to others simply as Ruthless, was a 30-year-old senior member of the Rebels Outlaw motorcycle gang. His shooting would mark not just the brutal end of one man's story, but the beginning of a deadly chain reaction, one that would see 2016 remembered as a year of gangland reckoning in New South Wales. Michael Scott Davey was born on December 16th, 1985. His descent into crime was swift and violent. At just 17, he and 3 others were charged over the savage bashing of a 19-year-old man in MU Plains in 2002. The victim, beaten unconscious and kicked in the head while helpless on the ground, later died from brain damage. Originally charged with murder, Michael and his co-accused pleaded guilty to manslaughter in 2005. The sentences, ranging from a few months to a little over a year, shocked victims' advocacy groups and sparked outrage across the state. Michael was released in October 2006. His time in jail did little to alter his path. By the time he reached his 20s, Michael had fully immersed himself in the world of the Rebels motorcycle gang, Australia's largest and most notorious outlaw bikie group. It didn't take long for him to rise through the ranks, earning a reputation as a ruthless enforcer and eventually becoming a senior figure within the gang. Despite his violent past and notorious reputation, Michael led a life that, in some ways, contrasted sharply with the image of a hardened criminal. By trade, he was a skilled motorcycle mechanic, and to those who knew him outside the world of crime, he was a quiet, respectful man, and above all, someone deeply devoted to his son Levi. His friends and acquaintances spoke of a man who made it a priority to keep his bikie life separate from his responsibilities as a father. To Levi, Michael wasn't a criminal, he was just dad. However, while Michael tried to maintain this balance, trouble was brewing within the gang that had become his second family. For years, the Rebels Motorcycle Club held the reputation of being one of the most stable and structured gangs in the country. With the most members of any outlaw bikie group in Australia, the Rebels had a well-established network and a public image shaped by mottos like, "Why waltz when you can rock and roll?" But stability does not last forever, especially in the volatile world of outlaw motorcycle gangs. In 2014, the Australian government struck a serious blow to the Rebels hierarchy when National President Alex Vella, known as the Maltese Falcon, had his visa cancelled while holidaying overseas. Vella, a permanent resident but not a citizen, found himself exiled in Malta, and with their figurehead suddenly removed, the Rebels were thrown into disarray. Without Vella at the helm, leadership divisions emerged, loyalty fractured, and a string of internal patchouts began destabilising chapters across the country. The once solid power structure crumbled under infighting, paranoia, and escalating violence. Just quickly, if you're enjoying this video so far and want more stories from the Australian underworld, please consider subscribing and liking this video. It really helps me out and helps the channel grow. If Michael was worried about the storm within his club, he didn't show it. Even after an attempt was made on his life in April 2015, he maintained his bravado. His Toyota Hilux was riddled with bullets in the car park of a Penrith shopping centre. He escaped without injury, and a 24-year-old was later arrested. The message, however, was loud and clear. Someone wanted him dead. Still, Michael shrugged it off. His social media presence revealed more defiance than fear. His Instagram bio read like a dare. "I came into this world kicking and screaming while covered in someone else's blood. No, I'm not afraid of leaving the same way." The bio, adorned with gun and explosion emojis, reflected his unflinching attitude toward danger. He wasn't scared for his life, even when it seemed like the world was closing in around him. However, not everyone was as lucky. Just 2 months later, in June 2015, fellow Rebels member Mark Easter, Sergeant-at-Arms of the Sydney City chapter and a close friend of Michael's, was murdered. Easter vanished after leaving his partner's home one night. Days later, his body was discovered dumped off the Pacific Highway near Cowan. While the motive behind Easter's death was clouded in mystery, Michael was left to mourn the loss of a friend who had shared a similar path through the ranks of the rebels. Despite these close calls and the violent world in which he operated, Michael remained resolute. But on the night of March 30th, 2016, his luck finally ran out. Just after midnight, Michael walked out of the Kingswood home he shared with his girlfriend Sky after receiving a phone call. He told her he was going to meet a friend. Less than 10 minutes later, he was lying in a driveway 100 meters from his front door, shot at least 9 times. A car was seen speeding away from the scene. Paramedics arrived, but Michael could not be revived. One resident recalled the gruesome aftermath. He described the scene as harrowing, with blood pooling around Michael's body and the unmistakable tattoos on his arms, a visual sign of his affiliation with the rebels. It appeared that Michael had attempted to run, possibly seeking shelter behind a nearby car or fence, but the wounds were too severe. It was a violent end for a man who had lived on the edge for so long. Within hours of the shooting, detectives from the State Crime Command's Homicide Squad launched Strike Force Glenorchy to investigate the murder. They were joined by Strike Force Raptor, New South Wales's Specialist Anti-Bikie Unit, and the Drug and Firearms Squad. As the investigation unfolded, all signs pointed inward. Police began to suspect that Michael's murder had been ordered from within the rebels themselves. The theory was that Michael had expressed a desire to leave the gang, and because of that, he was executed. Patching out from an outlaw motorcycle club, especially as a senior member, isn't a simple resignation. It's a dangerous act, seen by many in the gang world as betrayal, and betrayal often demands blood. Despite the whispers and the speculation, the rebels rallied to farewell their fallen brother. On April 8th, 2016, members from rebels chapters across Australia converged on Pine Grove Cemetery in Minchinbury. Dozens of men in black leather cuts bearing the insignia RFFR, Rebels Forever, Forever Rebels, lined the entrance. Women wore black, weeping and clutching flowers. The ceremony was tightly monitored by undercover police. At 1:10 in the afternoon, Michael's white coffin arrived on the sidecar of a Harley Davidson. Red, white and blue balloons floated into the chapel, where Michael's father and brother delivered tearful eulogies. Outside, those who couldn't fit into the chapel listened as He Ain't Heavy, He's My Brother played in the background. Even in death, the brotherhood clung to its own. Michael Davey's murder, while tragic, was only the beginning of a much darker and deadlier chapter in Sydney's criminal history. His death set off a chain of violent events, culminating in a series of high-profile gangland killings that kept police on edge throughout the year. On September 9th, 2016, just a few months after Michael's death, Mehmet Yilmaz, an associate of the Comanchero MC, was shot and killed in front of his partner in St. Mary's. Then, on November 14th, 2016, Pasquale Barbaro, a notorious mafia figure, was assassinated outside the Earlwood home of construction boss George Alex. Barbaro was ambushed while sitting in his Mercedes. An Audi Q7 pulled up beside his car and opened fire, striking him multiple times. Despite his attempt to flee, Barbaro was pursued by the shooters, who continued firing until he collapsed. His murder was another act of violence that raised questions about the motives behind these killings, whether they were tied to gang wars, rivalries, or the ever-present desire for dominance within Sydney's criminal underworld. If you want the full story of Pasquale Barbaro, make sure you check out my video about him after this. As police intensified their efforts to track down the culprits behind Barbaro's murder, their investigation led to a major breakthrough on November 29th, 2016. Several individuals were arrested in connection with the killing, and the police raids marked a significant turning point in the investigation. Among those arrested was Abuzar Sultani, the 27-year-old president of the Burwood chapter of the rebels. Sultani was arrested alongside 8 others, with him and 4 of them charged with murder in connection with Barbaro's death. In the months following his arrest, Sultani, now behind bars, made a chilling confession. "What do you think the rebels would say if they knew a president killed 2 members?" he asked a fellow inmate. The man, who was unaware of any additional deaths, pressed him for details, to which Sultani replied with one word: Ruthless, Michael's nickname. The revelation came as a surprise to both investigators and the public, as there had been no direct evidence linking Sultani to Michael's death at the time. Sultani confessed that the events leading up to Michael's death had begun months earlier, in December 2015, when he ordered an associate to track down Michael. He offered a $20,000 reward for information, and by March 22nd, 2016, the whereabouts of Michael Davey had been discovered. On the night of March 30th, 2016, Michael, unaware of the deadly trap set for him, thought he was simply heading out for a routine drug deal. He received a message on his BlackBerry from an associate who had lured him out under the guise of a buyer for GHB. Michael grabbed a San Pellegrino bottle from the fridge containing the drug and a pocket knife before heading outside. But it was a setup. As soon as Michael stepped out, he was ambushed. Sultani, along with Siar Munshizada, another gang member, shot Michael in cold blood, hitting him with 9 rounds. Munshizada used a .25 caliber firearm, while Sultani fired a 9mm pistol. Sultani, feeling no remorse, quickly contacted the associate who had been part of the plot. "Have you seen the news?" he texted, signalling the deadly outcome of his calculated action. Sultani's confession marked a pivotal moment in the investigation, offering the closure that had eluded authorities for so long. In August 2018, he and Munshizada appeared in Burwood Court, where they were officially charged with the murder of Michael Davey. As more details emerged, investigators discovered encrypted messages sent between Sultani and his associates via phantom secure BlackBerry phones. The investigators managed to piece together these encrypted exchanges, solidifying the case against the killers and linking them to multiple murders, drug trafficking, and other organised crime activities. Moreover, surveillance footage from CCTV cameras positioned around the group's unofficial headquarters, Sultani's apartment at Sydney Olympic Park, revealed the gang's movements on the night of several key murders. Yilmaz, Davey and Barbaro. Investigators meticulously traced their routes across Sydney, piecing together a chilling timeline of events. The combination of these encrypted messages and the damning surveillance footage ultimately built a compelling case against Sultani, Munshizada and their associates, laying the foundation for a trial that would see them face justice for their involvement in a brutal and far-reaching crime network. In 2021, Sultani, along with his henchmen Siar Munshizada, Joshua Baines and Mirwais Danishar, faced multiple trials over the course of 12 months. Siar Munshizada, described as Sultani's foot soldier, was found guilty of the murders of Michael, Yilmaz and Barbaro. Despite his lawyer's argument that he was merely a pawn in Sultani's game, the court sentenced him to 3 consecutive life sentences. Joshua Baines received a 36-year prison term for his role in Barbaro's murder, while Mirwais Danishar was jailed for at least 11 years as an accessory. While his associates were convicted after lengthy court proceedings, in 2019 Sultani pleaded guilty to the murders of Michael Davey, Mehmet Yilmaz and Pasquale Barbaro. Sultani's justification for his actions was a twisted sense of desensitization to violence, driven by ongoing threats to his life. He was sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole, with Justice Desfagan labelling him a serial killer. In October 2022, Sultani pleaded guilty to the murder of Nicholas Sprin, a drug dealer he killed in 2013, receiving an additional 20-year sentence. He has also been sentenced to another 28 years in jail for a raft of charges, including selling and possessing guns, drug supply, and directing his criminal network. In April 2024, after pleading guilty to the murder of Mark Easter, he was sentenced to the maximum term of 31 years and 6 months, with a non-parole period of 23 years. Now convicted of 5 murders and facing a total of 209 years in prison, Sultani has established himself as one of Australia's most prolific killers. Michael Davey was no innocent man. He was a killer, a rebel's enforcer, a man who lived and died by the rules of a violent world. He wasn't just a name on Abuzar Sultani's list of victims. He was also a father, a son, a brother, someone whose death wasn't only a headline or a case file, but a loss felt by the few who still saw the man beneath the patch. Behind the headlines and criminal labels was a man whose life ended too soon, not by enemies, but by those he once called his own. This brings us to the end of the case. Let me know what you think down below in the comments. Till next time, take care.